"Get this thug out of my sight," Sterling Harrington barked, tossing his coat onto seat 1A, the seat Damon Carter had legally paid for. As the crew forcibly dragged Damon to the back of the plane, treating the tech mogul like a common criminal, Sterling smirked, believing his family name gave him the right to rule the cabin. He couldn't be more wrong. He didn't realize that the nobody in the hoodie had just acquired the airline 3 hours ago. And while Sterling ordered his victory champagne, Damon was quietly authorizing a corporate execution that would strip the captain of his wings and leave Sterling bankrupt before they even touched the ground. The rain was hammering against the reinforced glass of JFK's Terminal 4, blurring the lights of the tarmac into smears of neon blue and orange. Inside the cabin of the massive Boeing 737, the air was still smelling faintly of leather and expensive sanitizer. Damon Carter adjusted the hood of his oversized slate gray Fear of God sweatshirt, pulling it slightly over his eyes. He was exhausted. 72 hours of negotiation in Silicon Valley had left him drained. The merger was done. The papers were signed. Technically, as of 3 hours ago, Damon wasn't just a tech CEO anymore. He was one of the most powerful men in global logistics. But nobody on this plane knew that. To the casual observer, Damon looked like a 20-some aspiring rapper or a tired college student who had splurged on an upgrade. He wore track pants, pristine, limited edition sneakers that cost more than a Honda Civic, and headphones that blocked out the world. He settled into seat 1A, the prime spot, the window seat in the first row of first class. It offered the most privacy, the best service, and the quiet he desperately needed. He closed his eyes, waiting for the soothing hum of the engines. "Excuse me." The voice was nasal, loud, and dripped with an unearned sense of authority. Damon didn't move. He kept his eyes closed, hoping the intruder would go away. "I said excuse me." A finger tapped aggressively on Damon's shoulder. Damon slid his headphones down around his neck and looked up. Standing over him was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a country club factory. He was in his 60s, wearing a navy pinstripe suit that screamed Savile Row with a silk pocket square and a watch that glinted under the cabin lights. His face was flushed red, likely from a pre-flight scotch in the lounge. "Can I help you?" Damon asked, his voice calm baritone and steady. "You're in my seat," the man snapped. He didn't look at Damon. He looked through him, his eyes scanning the cabin for a flight attendant. Damon glanced at his phone. "I'm pretty sure I'm in the right spot." "Look, son," the man sneered, leaning in closer, invading Damon's personal space. "I am Sterling Harrington. I have flown this route every month for 20 years. I always sit in 1A. It's my seat. The system clearly made a mistake putting you here. So be a good lad. Grab your backpack and go find your actual seat in the back." Damon sighed. He knew this type. He had dealt with Sterling Harringtons his entire life. Men who thought the world was paved specifically for their leather loafers. "Mr. Harrington," Damon said, putting his headphones back over his ears. "My ticket says 1A. I paid for 1A. I'm staying in 1A. Sterling's jaw tightened. The veins in his neck bulged. He turned around and snapped his fingers loudly. "Attendant Patricia, get over here." Patricia, the lead flight attendant, hurried over. She was a woman in her late 40s, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and a posture that suggested she was already done with this shift. She took one look at the scene. Sterling Harrington, a Platinum Elite frequent flyer, standing red-faced, and a young black man in a hoodie lounging in the most expensive seat on the plane. Her bias kicked in before she even spoke a word. "Mr. Harrington, what seems to be the problem?" she asked, her voice dripping with honey for the man in the suit. "This individual is refusing to vacate my seat." Sterling spat, pointing a manicured finger at Damon. "I want him moved now." Patricia turned to Damon. The honey in her voice evaporated, replaced by cold, hard steel. "Sir, I need to see your boarding pass." Damon unlocked his phone and held up the screen. It clearly displayed Carter. "Damon, Flight 42, Seat 1A, First Class." Patricia stared at it. She blinked. It was valid. But then she looked back at Sterling Harrington. Sterling was a VIP. He knew the CEO of the airline. He spent hundreds of thousands a year. This kid in the hoodie, he was probably an upgrade, a system glitch, or someone who used miles. He was expendable. There seems to be a double booking. Patricia lied. She didn't even check her manifest. Mr. Harrington is a priority passenger. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to gather your things. We have a seat for you in Economy Plus. Damon laughed. It was a dry, humorous sound. Economy Plus. You're joking, right? I paid $12,000 for this ticket. I don't think you heard me, Patricia said, her volume rising so the surrounding passengers could hear shaming him. You are disrupting the boarding process. If you cannot cooperate, I will have to call the gate agent to escort you off. Call him, Damon said, leaning back and crossing his legs. Call the Pope for all I care. I'm not moving. The tension in the first-class cabin was thick enough to choke on. Other passengers were watching now. A woman in 2B peeked over her Vogue magazine. A businessman in 1C was pretending to text, but was recording the audio. Patricia stormed to the front galley phone. Moments later, a man in a high-visibility vest marched onto the plane. This was Greg, the gate lead. Greg was a man who enjoyed the tiny amount of power his job gave him. A little too much. He had a buzz cut and a jaw set in a permanent scowl. What's the issue here? Greg barked. He won't move, Greg, Patricia said, crossing her arms and glaring at Damon. I've offered him a seat in row 34, and he's being belligerent. Sterling Harrington smirked, smoothing his lapels. He's trespassing, Greg. Get him off. Greg approached seat 1A. He didn't ask for a ticket. He didn't ask for an explanation. He saw the hoodie. He saw the skin color. He saw the defiance. Up now, Greg commanded. Damon looked at Greg. I have a valid ticket. If you touch me or my property, you're going to regret it. I am asking you to check the manifest properly. I don't need to check anything, Greg said, leaning down his face, inches from Damon's. We have the right to refuse service to anyone who poses a security risk or disrupts the crew. Right now, you are disrupting the crew. You are making Mr. Harrington uncomfortable. Now you can walk off, or I can have Port Authority drag you off in cuffs. Your choice, pal. Security risk, Damon repeated softly. I'm sitting here. You don't belong here. Sterling interjected, chuckling. Look at you. You probably stole that credit card anyway. The insult hung in the air. It was naked, ugly racism. Damon's eyes hardened. He looked at Patricia. You're going to let him talk to a passenger like that? Patricia looked away, busying herself with a napkin on a tray. Mr. Harrington is a respected client. You are delaying this flight. Damon realized then that there was no winning this argument with logic. They had already decided who he was. They had decided his worth based on his hoodie and his melanin. They wanted a show. He would give them the high road, but he would make sure the landing was devastating. Fine, Damon said. He stood up. He was taller than Greg, taller than Sterling. He towered over them, 6'3" of athletic build. For a split second, Greg flinched, expecting a fight. But Damon just reached up, grabbed his leather duffel from the overhead bin, and slung it over his shoulder. I'll get off, Damon said, his voice carrying through the silent cabin. But I want you both to remember this moment. I want you to remember that I gave you a chance to do the right thing. Save the speech, Greg scoffed, pointing to the door. Walk. Yeah, walk away, boy, Sterling muttered, finally sliding into seat 1A with a groan of satisfaction. Finally some civilization. Damon walked down the aisle. He didn't look down. He made eye contact with every single person in first class who had stayed silent. He walked past the curtains, through the business class, and towards the exit door, not the back of the plane. He wasn't taking the economy seat. He was leaving. As he reached the aircraft door, Greg smirked at him. Don't bother trying to get a refund. You were removed for conduct. Damon stopped on the jet bridge. He pulled out his phone. He didn't call customer service. He didn't call a lawyer. He dialed a private number, a number that very, very few people had. Yeah, it's Damon, he said into the phone as he walked up the jet bridge, the cold air of the terminal hitting his face. I need you to patch me through to Board of Directors. Emergency override code, Alpha 09. Yes. Now he paused, listening to the voice on the other end. No, I'm at JFK Flight 402. I was just kicked off. Yeah, by the staff for Sterling Harrington. Damon listened for a second. Then, a small, terrifying smile played on his lips. Buy it, Damon said. No, I don't mean a new ticket. I mean the airline. Well, not the whole airline. That takes too long. Trigger the clause in the acquisition contract we drafted last week. I want majority control effective immediately. How fast can you update the system? 5 minutes. Good. He stopped walking. He turned back and looked at the plane through the terminal window. Do it and tell the pilot to kill the engines. Nobody is going anywhere. Inside the cabin of Flight 402, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to celebratory, at least for one man. Sterling Harrington reclined in seat 1A, the leather still warm from where Damon had been sitting minutes earlier. He swirled the crystal glass of Krug ground champagne that Patricia had promptly served him, watching the bubbles rise with a sense of restored order. Terrible business, that Sterling said loudly to the man across the aisle in 1D. But you have to hold the line. If you let standards drop, society crumbles. It starts with a hoodie in first class, and next thing you know, they're letting sheep graze in the lobby of the Ritz. The man in 1D, a nervous-looking accountant named Arthur, gave a weak, non-committal smile and buried his nose in his tablet. He had seen the look in the young kid's eyes before he left. It wasn't the look of defeat. It was the look of a predator deciding how to dismantle its prey. Arthur had a bad feeling, but Sterling was oblivious. Patricia bustled through the cabin, her demeanor transformed. With Damon gone, she was the picture of efficiency and grace. She fluffed Sterling's pillow. She topped off his drink. She felt a smug satisfaction. She had protected the airline's image. She had kept the high V-value client happy. Greg, the gate lead, had given her a thumbs up before sealing the aircraft door. They were a team. They held the line. Ladies and gentlemen. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. This was Captain Anderson, a veteran with 30 years in the sky. We have received clearance for pushback. Flight attendants prepare for departure and cross-check. Next stop, London Heathrow. Flight time is 6 hours and 40 minutes. The plane shuddered as the tug vehicle began to push the massive beast away from the gate. The engines with the low, powerful hum of the General Electric turbines beginning to spool up. The lights in the cabin dimmed. The safety video began to play on the screens. Sterling closed his eyes, ready to sleep. He had won. But then the hum died. It wasn't a slow fade. It was a sudden, jarring cut. The lights flickered and went to full, bright emergency power. The air conditioning vents stopped blowing. The silence that fell over the plane was heavier than the noise had been. What now? Sterling groaned, opening one eye. Maintenance issues. Unbelievable. In the cockpit, Captain Anderson and First Officer Stevens were staring at their instrument panel, in bewilderment. We lost engine start, Stevens said, tapping the fuel flow indicators. Both engines simultaneously. It's like the FedEx system just cut the signal. Reset the breakers. Anderson ordered, his brow furrowed. Check the APU. We still have electrical. Captain Stevens said, his voice trembling slightly. Look at the ACARS screen. We have a message from HQ. It's a red code. Anderson leaned in. The aircraft communications addressing and reporting system usually displayed weather updates or routing changes. Today, it displayed a message in stark, blinking green text. Command immediate halt. Priority absolute. Source chairman of the board. Acting instruction. Return to gate B14. Do not depart. Law enforcement en route. Chairman of the board, Anderson whispered. Old man Reynolds is in the hospital. He hasn't sent a command in 2 years. And who is acting? Sir Stevens pointed to the bottom of the screen. The ownership code just updated the airline, the parent company. The ticker symbol just changed in the system. Back in the terminal, standing by the panoramic window, Damon Carter watched the plane stop moving. He was still on the phone, his voice low and clinical. Yes, Damon said. I see the stop now. I want you to patch me through to the station manager at JFK. His name is Richard Vance, right? No, not Vance. Richard Henderson. Get Henderson on the line. Tell him that if he wants to keep his pension, he needs to get down to gate B14 in 3 minutes. Damon hung up. He looked at the reflection in the glass. He didn't see a kid in a hoodie anymore. He saw the man who had built a logistical empire from a garage in Detroit. He saw the man who had just leveraged a hostile takeover clause that was buried on page 400 of a merger agreement his lawyers had drafted just in case. He wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was the landlord, and the eviction notice was about to be served. Inside the plane, Patricia was in the galley picking up the interphone to call the cockpit. "Captain, the passengers are getting restless. Mr. the Harrington is asking for a refill, and the AC is off. It's getting hot back here. Patricia." Captain Anderson's voice was tight, stressed. "Sit down. Strap in. We are being towed back to the gate." Towed back. "Why is it a mechanical?" "No," Anderson said. "It's management. Big management. Someone is coming on board." Patricia hung up, confused. She looked at Greg, who was still on the jet bridge, as the bridge had to be reconnected. Through the porthole window of the door, she saw Greg arguing with someone on his radio. He looked pale. The plane jolted as it reconnected with the jet bridge. The fastened seatbelt sign chimed off, but nobody moved. Sterling slammed his empty glass down. "This is incompetence. I have a meeting in London at 9 a.m. If I miss it, I will sue this airline into the ground." He didn't know that the man who could actually sue the airline into the ground and buy the ground it stood on was currently walking down the jet bridge, flanked not by police, but by the terrified station manager, Richard Henderson. The jet bridge was cold, a stark contrast to the heated cabin. Greg, the gate lead, who had so forcefully ejected Damon 10 minutes ago, was standing by the aircraft door, furiously typing on his terminal. He was trying to figure out why the system had locked him out. Every time he tried to scan a standby ticket, the screen flashed, "User unauthorized, access revoked." "Stupid piece of junk," Greg muttered, hitting the side of the monitor. "It's not the machine, Greg." The voice came from behind him. Greg spun around. Walking down the slope of the bridge was Richard Henderson, the JFK station manager. Henderson was a man who usually sat in a glass office overlooking the tarmac, drinking coffee and signing timesheets. He was never on the ground, and he certainly never looked this sweaty. And walking right next to him with a terrifyingly calm expression was the thug in the hoodie. "Damon Carter, Mr. Henderson." Greg stammered, "Sir, we have a situation. I had to remove a disruptive passenger, and now the captain says—" "Shut up, Greg," Henderson hissed. His face was gray. "Just shut up." Greg blinked. "Excuse me." Henderson turned to Damon. He looked like he wanted to bow. "Mr. Carter." "Sir, I apologize. I had no idea you were inspecting the hub today. If we had known." "You didn't know," Damon said, his voice echoing in the metal tunnel. "Because I wasn't inspecting. I was traveling. I was going home to sleep. But your staff decided I didn't look the part." Damon stopped inches from Greg. Greg looked at Damon, then at Henderson, his brain struggling to compute the hierarchy shift. This guy, Greg, pointed at Damon, a nervous laugh bubbling up. "Boss, this is the guy I kicked off. He was harassing Mr. Harrington. He's nobody." Henderson closed his eyes, physically pained by his subordinate stupidity. "Greg, the man standing in front of you, is Damon Carter. As of 12 minutes ago, his holding company, Carter Logistics, executed a controlling interest purchase of our parent corporation. He isn't a passenger. He owns the plane. He owns the gate. He owns the uniform you're wearing." Greg's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The blood drained from his face so fast, he looked like he might faint. He looked at Damon's sneakers. He looked at the hoodie. He looked at the face he had sneered at. Greg stuttered. "Open the door," Damon said softly. "Sir, open the door, Greg." Greg's hands shook as he punched the code into the keypad. The hydraulic hiss of the aircraft door opening sounded like a judgment. Damon stepped through the threshold. The smell of the cabin hit him again. Leather and expensive sanitizer. But this time the dynamic was different. He didn't turn right into the cockpit. He didn't turn left into economy. He stood in the galley blocking the aisle. Patricia was there, holding a tray of water glasses. When she saw Damon, she dropped the tray. Crash glass shattered. Water splashed over her shoes and the carpet. The noise silenced the entire first-class cabin. "You," Patricia gasped. "How did you get back on Greg, get security." Damon stepped over the broken glass. He didn't look at the mess. He looked directly at her. "Greg can't help you, Patricia," Damon said. "Greg is currently outside, trying to figure out how he's going to pay his mortgage." Sterling Harrington, hearing the commotion, unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. He was red-faced, fueled by champagne and rage. "You again," Sterling shouted, pointing a trembling finger. "This is harassment. I am a personal friend of the CEO. I will have you arrested. I will have you banned from every airport in America." Damon smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who had cornered a particularly slow sheep. "You're friends with the CEO?" Damon asked, walking slowly down the aisle until he was standing right in front of Sterling's seat. "Seat 1A. "Yes, Jonathan Reynolds and I go way back," Sterling blustered. "Jonathan Reynolds retired this morning," Damon said calmly, projecting his voice so the whole cabin could hear. "He sold his controlling stake. To me." Damon reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and turned it around to show Sterling. It was a live video feed of a news broadcast. The headline scrolling at the bottom read, "Breaking news. Tech mogul Damon Carter acquires Skyline Airways in shocking hostile takeover." Sterling stared at the screen. He squinted. He looked at Damon. "No," Sterling whispered. That's impossible. Look at you." "Yes, look at me," Damon said, spreading his arms. "I'm the guy in the hoodie. I'm the guy who stole the seat. I'm the security risk, and you are sitting in my chair." The silence in the cabin was absolute. Even the babies in economy seemed to sense the tension and stopped crying. The air conditioning was still off, and the heat was rising, but Patricia felt cold deep in her bones. Damon turned his back on Sterling and looked at the crew. Captain Anderson had stepped out of the cockpit, standing nervously by the door. Captain Damon said, nodding respectfully, "You have a good record. 30 years spotless. You fly the plane safely. You can stay." Captain Anderson let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Thank you, sir." However, Damon turned his gaze to Patricia. She was trembling, pressing her back against the galley wall. "The cabin crew is a different story." "Sir, please." Patricia whimpered, tears forming in her eyes. "I was just following protocol. Mr. Harrington is a platinum member. I didn't know." "You didn't know I was rich," Damon corrected her, his voice slicing through her excuses. "That's your defense. If I had been wearing a suit, you would have treated me with respect. But because I look like this," he gestured to his outfit, "you treated me like garbage. You assumed I was a fraud. You assumed I was a criminal." I was stressed," Patricia stammered. "No, Patricia, you were biased," Damon said. "And bias is a liability. In my company, we don't have liabilities." He looked at the station manager Henderson, who was hovering in the doorway with a tablet. "Mr. Henderson, what is Patricia's employment status?" Henderson tapped the screen. "She is currently lead flight attendant, sir. Seniority 15 years. "Update it," Damon said. "To what, sir? Terminated, effective immediately. Cause gross misconduct, discrimination, and failure to verify passenger manifest." Patricia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "You can't do that. The union protects employees," Damon said coldly. "It doesn't protect liabilities, who humiliate the owner of the airline in front of 50 witnesses. You can fight it in court. I have a legal team that costs more per hour than you make in a year." "Do you want to try?" Patricia sobbed, looking around for support. None came. The other flight attendants looked down, terrified of making eye contact. "Get your bag," Damon ordered, "and get off my plane." Patricia stumbled forward, grabbing her purse from the crew locker. She walked past the passengers she had pined for earlier. They looked away. She walked past Sterling Harrington, who didn't even look at her, too absorbed in his own impending doom. As Patricia exited the plane, passing Greg, who was leaning against the wall of the jet bridge looking sick, Damon turned his attention back to seat 1A. Sterling Harrington had sat back down, trying to make himself small. He was avoiding eye contact, pretending to read the safety card. "Mr. Harrington," Damon said. Sterling didn't look up. "Silling," Damon said louder. Sterling looked up. The arrogance was gone, replaced by fear. "Look, Mr. Carter." "Damon, obviously, there was a misunderstanding. I was having a bad day. My blood sugar was low. If you want the seat, take it. I'll move to 1B. We can share a drink, discuss business. I'm in real estate, you know, high end. Damon laughed. I don't want the seat, Sterling. I have a private jet. I only flew commercial today because my Gulfstream is in for maintenance in Zurich. I don't need this seat. Then we're good, Sterling asked, a hopeful smile wavering on his lips. No, Damon said. We're not good. You see, you didn't just take my seat. You insulted me. You called me boy. You told me I stole my credit card. Damon signaled to Henderson again. Mr. Henderson, look up Sterling Harrington's account. I have it here, sir. Platinum Elite 3 million lifetime miles. Delete it, Damon said. The color drained from Sterling's face. What? Wipe it, Damon commanded. Cancel his status, void his miles, and put him on the permanent no-fly list for Skyline Airways and all our subsidiary partners. You can't do that, Sterling shrieked, standing up again. I have millions of miles. That's worth a fortune. It was worth a fortune, Damon corrected. Now it's worth nothing. Just like your ticket for this flight. Damon pointed to the door. Get out. I will not, Sterling roared. I paid for this seat, Mr. Henderson, Damon said calmly. Is this man a passenger on this flight? Henderson checked the tablet. No, sir. His ticket has been refunded and canceled. Technically, he is trespassing on federal property. Damon looked at the door where 2 airport police officers had just arrived, called by the confused ground crew. Officers, Damon said, this man is trespassing and refusing to leave the aircraft. Please remove him. Sterling's eyes went wide as the officers marched down the aisle. Don't touch me. Do you know who I am? I am Sterling Harrington. Sir, let's go, the officer said, grabbing Sterling's arm. Get your hands off me, Sterling shouted as they dragged him out of the seat. He kicked and screamed his expensive suit, bunching up his dignity completely stripped away. He was dragged down the aisle, past the rows of staring passengers. You'll hear from my lawyers, Sterling screamed as he was hauled onto the jet bridge. I look forward to it, Damon called after him. When the screaming faded, the cabin was dead silent. Damon stood at the front. He looked at the passengers. He looked at the remaining crew. I apologize for the delay, Damon said, his voice returning to that calm baritone steadiness. We will be departing shortly. Drinks are on the house for the entire plane, even economy. He looked at Captain Anderson. Captain, get us to London. I have a meeting to get to. Yes, sir, Anderson said, saluting smartly. Damon grabbed his duffel bag from where he had left it near the door. He didn't go back to seat 1A. He walked to the empty jump seat near the cockpit, sat down and buckled in. I'll sit here, Damon said. I don't like seat 1A anymore. It has bad vibes. But the story wasn't over. The plane took off, but the fallout on the ground was just beginning. While Flight 402 was cruising at 35,000 feet over the Atlantic, a digital storm was brewing on the ground, one that moved significantly faster than a Boeing 7737. Arthur, the quiet accountant in seat 1D, who had pretended to be busy on his tablet, hadn't been working on spreadsheets. He had been recording. The moment Sterling Harrington had snapped his fingers at the flight attendant, Arthur had hit record. He captured everything. The condescension, the boy comment, the eviction, and the glorious earth-shattering return of Damon Carter. Arthur connected to the plane's Wi-Fi. He uploaded the video to Twitter and TikTok with the caption, "Racist guy kicks a hoodie kid out of first class." Turns out, the kid just bought the airline 5 minutes later. Karma, Lanor, Skyline, and Damon Carter. By the time the plane began its descent into London, Heathrow, the video, had 14 million views. JFK Airport. The ground war back at JFK. Patricia was sitting on a plastic chair in the employee break room, a room she was technically no longer allowed to be in. She was sobbing into her hands. Her badge had been deactivated. Security was waiting outside to escort her to the parking lot. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her daughter. "Mom, is that you in the video? Why is everyone tagging me? People are saying you got fired for being racist." Patricia's heart stopped. She opened the link. There she was in high definition sneering at Damon. The comments were brutal. "Fire her immediately. This is why I hate flying." She looked so smug until she realized he was the boss. She wasn't just unemployed, she was unemployable. In the age of the internet, she was branded. She realized with a sinking dread that she wouldn't be working in customer service ever again. London Heathrow, the Welcome Committee. When Flight 402 taxied to the gate at Heathrow, the scene was unusual. Usually ground crews are busy and distracted. Today, they were standing in lines watching the plane. Damon Carter unbuckled from the jump seat. He thanked the pilots again. He grabbed his duffel bag. "Mr. Carter," Captain Anderson said, leaning out of the cockpit. "It was an honor flying you. The honor is mine," Captain Damon said. "We're going to make some changes, but you're safe." Damon walked off the plane first. As he entered the terminal, he saw the chaos. Paparazzi were there, a rarity for an airline arrival, but the news of the mid-air acquisition had broken on CNBC and Bloomberg. The headline, "Hoodie CEO buys airline mid-flight," was too good to ignore. But the real drama was waiting for the man who had been dragged off. Sterling Harrington had been released from airport security custody in New York after being cited for trespassing. He was currently sitting in a holding cell waiting for his lawyer. He was furious. He demanded his phone. When the officer finally handed him his iPhone, Sterling expected to see missed calls from his assistants apologizing for the delay. Instead, he saw his life dismantling in real time. Notification: Harrington Holdings Board Meeting Emergency Session email from legal termination of partnership. Vanderbilt Group email from Country Club membership review pending. Sterling's hands shook. He dialed his chief of staff. Michael, fix this. Get a PR firm on the line. That thug Carter. Mr. Harrington." Michael's voice was icy. "I'm resigning." "What, you can't resign? I'm in the middle of a crisis." "You are the crisis," Sterling, Michael said. "The video is everywhere. You called him boy. Do you know who our biggest investors are? Half of them are under 40. They worship guys like Damon Carter. We lost the Tokyo deal. We lost the Dubai financing. And the bank just called in the loan on the Manhattan Tower. They're invoking the morality clause in your contract." "Morality clause," Sterling screamed. "I'm the victim here? You're toxic, Sterling. Nobody wants to touch you. Goodbye." The line went dead. Sterling sat on the hard bench of the holding cell. He looked at his reflection in the dark screen of his phone. The suit was wrinkled. The tie was crooked. The man who thought he owned the world had lost everything because he couldn't handle sitting next to a hoodie for 48. Hours later, Skyline Airways headquarters, Chicago. The boardroom on the 50th floor of the Skyline Tower had a view that usually commanded respect. It looked out over the steel-gray expanse of Lake Michigan, a view reserved for the masters of the universe. Today, however, the mood inside was less master of the universe and more awaiting execution. 12 men and women sat around the mahogany table. These were the board of directors people whose net worths were calculated in 9 figures. They wore Italian wool suits, pearl necklaces, and expressions of barely concealed panic. The chair at the head of the table was empty. "He's 10 minutes late," whispered Charles Whitmore, the chairman of the Remuneration Committee. Charles was 70, with skin like parchment, and a belief that the internet was a passing fad. "This is a power play. He wants us to sweat. He owns 51% of the voting stock," Charles replied. Sarah Jenkins, the CFO, who was furiously tapping on her iPad. "He can make us sweat for as long as he wants. Do you see the stock price? It's up 12% since the video went viral. The market loves him. We are irrelevant." The double doors swung open. The room went silent. Damon Carter walked in. He wasn't wearing the bespoke suit they expected of a man who had just conquered a Fortune 500 company. He was wearing the same slate-gray Fear of God hoodie he had worn on the plane. He carried a disposable coffee cup and a battered leather notebook. He didn't say hello. He walked to the head of the table, placed the coffee cup on the coaster, and remained standing. He looked at each of them in turn. The silence stretched for an agonizing 30 seconds. "You all look very comfortable," Damon said finally. His voice was quiet, terrifyingly calm. "Mr. Carter." Charles Whitmore cleared his throat. "On behalf of the board, we welcome you. However, there are protocols regarding protocols." Damon repeated, cutting him off. "Let's talk about protocols. Protocol says a platinum flyer gets to abuse a passenger because he doesn't like the way he dresses. Protocol says, my staff, our staff, cower in fear of a man with a shiny credit card, rather than doing what is morally right. Damon slid the notebook across the table. It spun and stopped perfectly in front of Sarah. Read the first page, Sarah Damon ordered. Sarah looked down, her face palled. It's a list of names. Read them, Damon said. Patricia Evans, Gregory Miller, Arthur Penhaligon. Sarah paused. Mr. Carter, these are the crew members from Flight 402. Keep going, Damon said. Richard Henderson, station manager. Sarah swallowed hard. And Charles Whitmore. Charles choked on his water. Me? Why is my name on a list with flight attendants? Because you are the problem, Charles? Damon said, leaning his hands on the table. I listened to the recordings of the board meetings from the last 5 years. You voted against diversity training 3 times. You called it woke nonsense. You voted to cut the customer service budget to boost the dividend yield. You built the culture that allowed Sterling Harrington to think he owned seat 1A. Now see here. Charles stood up, his face flushing red. I built this company. You built a bank that flies airplanes, Damon corrected. I build logistics networks that serve people. As of this morning, I have accepted your resignation. I didn't resign. Check your email, Damon said coldly. My legal team found a conflict of interest regarding your wife's construction firm and the Terminal 5 contract. You can resign with a full pension and a non-disclosure agreement, or we can go to the press and you can spend your retirement in court. Pick one. Charles slumped back into his chair. The fight left him instantly. He looked at his phone, saw the email, and closed his eyes. Good, Damon said, turning to the rest of the room. Now, for the rest of you, no one else is getting fired today. But your lives are about to change. Effective immediately, the executive dining room is closed. The executive elevator is disabled, and this... He gestured to their suits is over. Excuse me, asked a board member named Robert. Every member of this board will spend 3 days a month working a shift, Damon announced. Baggage handling, gate agent, ticket counter. You will wear the uniform. You will deal with the delayed flights, the angry passengers, and the crying babies. You will learn what it feels like to be on the other side of the counter. That's preposterous, Robert scoffed. I'm a strategist, not a bag boy. Then you're fired, Damon said simply. Next. Silence engulfed the room. No one moved. Excellent. Damon smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Welcome to the new Skyline Airways. Meeting adjourned. The fall of Rome, New York City. While Damon was cleaning house in Chicago, Sterling Harrington was watching his life incinerate in Manhattan. He sat in the office of his attorney, Simon Glover's. The office was plush, filled with the scent of old money, but the air was thick with the smell of defeat. It can't be legal, Simon Sterling shouted, pacing the Persian rug. They can't just ban me. I have 3 million miles. That's theft. That's grand larceny. Simon Glover's, a man who had defended mobsters and embezzlers, looked at Sterling with pity. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Sterling, sit down. I will not sit down. I want to sue. I want to sue Damon Carter. I want to sue the airline. And I want to sue that kid who filmed me. We can't sue, Simon said softly. Why not I pay you a retainer of $50,000 a month to sue people because Simon opened a thick file folder of the morality clause in your liquidity agreements. Sterling stopped pacing the what you leveraged your holdings in the Harrington Tower to finance the buyout of the Seaport project. Remember, Simon explained the bank included a standard clause. If the borrower engages in conduct that bring public disrepute, scandal, or ridicule to the lending institution, they have the right to call the loan immediately. So I'll pay the interest. They don't want the interest, Sterling. They want the principal. The video has 40 million views. The hashtag Sterling the Racist is trending #1 globally. The bank doesn't want to be associated with you. They called the loan this morning. Sterling felt his knees go weak. He sank into the leather chair. How much all of it, Simon said. $450 million. Due by close of business, Friday. I don't have $450 million in cash. Sterling gasped. It's all tied up in assets. Exactly, Simon said. Which means they are seizing the assets. The tower, the Hamptons house, the yacht. It's a fire sale, Sterling. And because your reputation is radioactive, no one is offering market value. The vultures are circling. Sterling stared at the wall. "But I'm Sterling Harrington." "Not anymore," Simon said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. "This arrived by COA an hour ago. It was a letter from the Exclusionary Committee of the Knickerbocker Club, the most exclusive social club in New York. Dear Mr. Harrington, in light of recent events, the Board of Governors has voted unanimously to revoke your membership, effective immediately. Please arrange for a representative to clear out your locker within 24 hours. Your presence on the premises is no longer permitted." "They kicked me out," Sterling whispered, his voice cracking. "My grandfather founded that club." "It gets worse," Simon said, bracing himself. "Your wife's lawyer called. She's filing for divorce. She's citing irreconcilable differences due to public humiliation. She's going for full custody of the twins." Sterling put his head in his hands. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock. Simon Sterling mumbled, "Get me a plane. I need to go to the Cayman Islands. I have reserves there. I can wait this out." Simon shook his head. "I can't get you a plane, Sterling. Charter 1. I don't care about the cost. It's not the cost. No one will fly you. What Damon Carter didn't just ban you from Skyline." Simon explained grimly. He shared the security footage and the incident report with the FAA and the International Air Transport Association. He flagged you as a Level 1 disruptive passenger, high risk to crew safety. NetJets won't take you. VistaJet won't take you. Even the private charters are declining the booking. They saw what happened to Skyline stock when they took a stand. No one wants to be the airline that flew Sterling Harrington to safety. So I'm trapped. Sterling looked up, his eyes wild with fear. "You can take the train," Simon suggested dryly, "or the bus. But as far as the sky is concerned, you're grounded indefinitely." 6 months later, the calmer of the ground. The Greyhound bus station in Newark, New Jersey, smelled of diesel fumes and despair. It was a far cry from the first-class lounge at JFK. Sterling Harrington sat on a plastic bench that was bolted to the floor. He was wearing a tracksuit, not a designer one, but a cheap one he had bought at a discount store. His bespoke suits had been auctioned off by the bankruptcy court. He clutched a paper ticket in his hand. Destination, Tallahassee, Florida. He was moving into a one-bedroom apartment owned by a distant cousin who had taken pity on him. "Bus 402 to Tallahassee boarding lane 4, the driver shouted. Sterling stood up, his back aching. He dragged his 2 suitcases towards the bus. "Ticket." The driver grunted. He was a large man who looked like he had zero patience. Sterling handed him the ticket. The driver scanned it, then looked at Sterling. He squinted. "Hey," the driver said. "You look like that guy, the airline guy." Sterling froze. He pulled his baseball cap down lower. "I have a common face." "Nah." The driver chuckled, tearing the stub. "That guy was a rich prick. You look like a bum. Get on." Sterling climbed the steps of the bus. The aisle was narrow. The air conditioning was broken. The smell of stale sandwiches and body odor hit him. He walked to the front row. The seat behind the driver. It was the best seat on the bus. "Excuse me," a voice said. Sterling looked up. A young woman with a baby was standing there. She looked exhausted. "That's the priority seat for disabled and elderly," she said, pointing to the sign. "I have a baby." Sterling looked at the sign. He looked at the woman. The old Sterling would have argued. The old Sterling would have demanded to see a manager, but the old Sterling was dead. "Sorry," Sterling muttered. "My mistake." He picked up his bags and walked to the very back of the bus. He squeezed into the last row, next to the toilet. The engine roared to life, vibrating through the thin cushion. As the bus pulled out of the station, rain began to streak the window. Sterling rested his forehead against the cold glass. He watched a plane taking off from Newark Airport, in the distance, climbing effortlessly into the clouds, banking toward Europe. He closed his eyes and wept. 1 year later, Los Angeles International Airport, LAX. The holiday rush was in full swing. The terminal was a sea of humanity. Stressed parents, running children, and businessmen shouting into phones. At the Skyline Airways economy check-in counter, the line was moving surprisingly fast. The agents were efficient, polite, and smiling. A young man no older than 22 sprinted up to the counter. He was breathless, his face slick with sweat. He wore frayed jeans and a vintage t-shirt that had seen better days. He carried a guitar case on his back that was held together with duct tape. "Please," the young man gasped, leaning on the counter. "I'm late. The traffic on the 405 was a nightmare. I have to get to Austin. My audition is in 4 hours. If I miss this flight, my career is over before it starts." The agent behind the counter looked up. His name tag read Richard. He was an older man, perhaps in his late 50s, with silver hair and a kind face. He wore the standard blue Skyline uniform, but he wore it with a strange sense of dignity. Richard Henderson, formerly the station manager of JFK, now the senior vice president of operations, was completing his mandatory monthly shift on the ground. His feet were killing him. He had been shouted at by a lady regarding a lost poodle for 20 minutes, but he was here. "Can I see your ID and ticket, son?" Richard asked gently. I don't have a seat assignment." The kid stammered, handing over a crumpled driver's license. His name was Leo. "I bought a standby ticket. It was all I could afford." Richard typed the name into the system. The screen flashed red. Flight 909 to Austin. Fully booked, oversold by 3. Richard looked at the kid. He saw the desperation in his eyes. He saw the guitar case. He saw the hunger. It reminded him of someone. It reminded him of a man in a hoodie who had changed the world. "Leo," Richard said softly, "the flight is full. There isn't a single seat in economy." Leo's face crumbled. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. No, please, you don't understand. This is my shot. I've been busking for 3 years to get this audition." Richard looked at the line behind Leo. People were getting impatient. Protocol demanded he send the kid away. Protocol demanded he say better luck next time. But Richard remembered the new company motto engraved on the wall behind him. Humanity first. Richard looked at his screen again. There was one seat, but it wasn't economy. It was seat 1A. It had been reserved for a dead-heading pilot who had just canceled. Richard's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He looked at the kid's t-shirt. He looked at the hoodie rule that Damon had instilled in them. Judge the heart, not the cloth. Richard typed in his personal override code, XCR001, the printer word. A boarding pass slid out. It had a gold stripe across the top. "You're right, Leo," Richard said, sliding the ticket across the counter. "There are no seats in economy, so I'm going to have to put you in first." Leo froze. He stared at the ticket. "Sat 1A. First class," Leo stammered. "I can't pay for this. I have $40 in my bank account. It's on the house." Richard winked. "Just do me a favor." Anything. Leo breathed, tears welling up in his eyes. "When you make it big," Richard pointed to the guitar case. "When you're selling out stadiums and flying in private jets, don't be a jerk. Remember what it felt like to stand here." Leo nodded vigorously, wiping his eyes. "I promise, I swear. Go," Richard urged him. "Gate 42. Run." Leo grabbed his ticket and sprinted toward security. He turned back once, waving his hand high in the air. Richard waved back. Richard let out a long sigh and leaned back against the counter. His lower back throbbed. He was tired. He could be in his office right now, drinking scotch and looking at spreadsheets. But as he watched Leo disappear into the crowd, Richard felt a warmth in his chest that no spreadsheet had ever given him. "Next guest, please," Richard called out, with a genuine smile. A woman stepped up, looking frustrated. "My bag is 2 pounds overweight, and I refuse to pay the fee." Richard smiled. "Let's see what we can do about that, Mom." High above the terminal, on a massive billboard overlooking the airport, was a new advertisement for Skyline Airways. It didn't feature a plane. It didn't feature a smiling stewardess. It featured a simple black and white photo of a young black man in a slate gray hoodie sitting in a first-class seat, looking out the window with a quiet intensity. Below the image were just 3 words. "Earn your wings." What a journey. From the rain-sick tarmac of JFK to the lonely back of a Greyhound bus, Sterling Harrington learned the hard way that money can buy a seat, but it can't buy class. And Damon Carter proved that true power isn't about exclusion, it's about opportunity. It's a story that reminds us that the person you mistreat today might be the person who holds your fate tomorrow. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please smash that like button. It helps the algorithm find more people who need to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new drama. I want to hear from you. Do you think Sterling's punishment was too harsh? Or did he get exactly what he deserved? Tell me your verdict in the comments below. I'll be hearting the best answers.